Alright everyone, make yourselves comfortable. Pour a coffee or perhaps a more potent beverage because this tale is truly unbelievable. This narrative demonstrates that real life can be considerably more bizarre and frankly more foolish than any fictional account. Can you imagine being roused at 5 in the morning by a detonation so fierce it jars your very being and makes you suspect a nearby plane accident? I've experienced it. And the perpetrators? Let's just say the homeowner association enforcers from the adjacent property likely achieved a new global benchmark for the quickest shift from self-styled peacekeepers to actual convicts, all before their morning meal. The most remarkable aspect was their complete unawareness that the county sheriff himself was asleep in my spare bedroom a mere 50 yards from the location where they opted to engage in destructive antics with my ranch entrance, utilizing what appeared very much like an improvised explosive device. Ah, the exquisite irony. It's a lengthy tale, an outlandish one, but bear with me as the conclusion is exceptionally rewarding. For nearly 5 generations, my family has held ownership of the Barm Ranch. We are discussing more than 100 years of intense effort and dedication invested into this land, situated near the base of the Blackwood Mountains. This is more than mere real estate, it represents our heritage, a significant legacy. Our operations involve raising cattle, cultivating hay, and generally maintaining a private existence. Existence here is dictated by the changing seasons, the requirements of our animals, and the consistent pace of diligent labor. It was a tranquil, almost idyllic setting until the Whispering Pines luxury estate development began to emerge, akin to an especially aggressive weed, along our eastern boundary approximately a decade ago. Abruptly, our serene section of the county found itself inundated with individuals who appeared to believe they had purchased a piece of a fantasy world rather than a functional farming environment. Their residences were enormous, consistently beige, and arranged more densely than fish in a can, each boasting a perfectly groomed yard that likely used more water than all my livestock combined. And naturally, these developments included a homeowners association, a source of frustration for numerous property holders. The first signs of discontent were foreseeable: objections regarding the odor of manure and aroma. I connect with genuine labor and a thriving natural system, correspondence concerning the sounds of cattle at inappropriate times, such as, for instance, daybreak. My most cherished was the formal complaint regarding the aesthetic disruption caused by my 50-year-old tractor, which I sometimes needed to position near our common fence. Initially, I made an effort to be amicable. I went to a few of their initial HOA gatherings, trying to clarify that a ranch is, fundamentally, a ranch. I emphasized that our presence predated even the conceptualization of Whispering Pines by its developer. My attempts at clarification were received with vacant expressions or, even more aggravatingly, patronizing smirks from an individual named Arthur Abernathy, the self-declared ruler of Whispering Pines and president of the HOA. Abernathy belonged to that category of individuals whose feeling of self-importance appeared to swell with each word he spoke. He preferred light-colored polo shirts, a size too snug, stretched tightly over a substantial midsection, and operated a shiny black Escalade that he likely buffed more frequently than he communicated with his spouse. He possessed a knack for disdainfully regarding others, even those who were taller, as I am. He explicitly conveyed his perception of our ranch as an regrettable rural blemish on his otherwise flawless suburban ideal. On one occasion, he genuinely described his territory as the Riviera of the Rockies, a statement that revealed all I needed to understand about his grasp of the real world. We were merely the unattractive surface access to his make-believe utopia. The small irritations gradually yet steadily intensified. Brief messages were attached to our fence posts concerning weeds, which were, in fact, indigenous wildflowers. There were demands for us to relocate a specific watering trough because its countrified appearance conflicted with their communal guidelines. For the most part, I paid them no mind, placing the progressively passive-aggressive, and later overtly hostile, letters into an expanding file I titled Abernathy's Follies. I assumed he was primarily all talk, a minor despot in a limited sphere. I misjudged the extent of his misconceptions and the measures he would take to impose his non-existent power. The initial indication that matters were escalating beyond mere written disputes emerged when Abernathy, with his supposed boundless sagacity, concluded that Whispering Pines required its own personal security team. Not simply a drowsy attendant in a kiosk, understand, but genuine tactical gear-clad, aspiring commandos monitoring their immaculate cul-de-sacs in golf carts altered to resemble small police vehicles. He employed two individuals who appeared to have been turned down by every legitimate law enforcement organization and several recreational paintball groups for excessive zeal. We promptly dubbed them Rambo and Terminator. This, dear readers, is the point at which the narrative truly becomes outlandish, because these individuals were not merely community watch participants. Abernathy had managed to persuade both them and himself that they constituted an authentic police force, and their main objective, it appeared, was my ranch. I ought to have realized at that juncture that Abernathy would not cease his actions with strongly phrased correspondence. His self-importance was like an out-of-control locomotive, and my ranch entrance was seemingly positioned directly in its path. The tranquility before the upheaval was diminishing, and the initial blasts of an utterly foolish tempest were starting to stir. The appearance of Rambo and Terminator, or by their preferred titles Chief Security Officer Jenkins and Deputy Officer Miller, signaled a fresh period of ridiculousness. Jenkins, also known as Rambo, was a stout man whose tactical vest seemed to be strained to its limits. He possessed an always flushed, irate countenance, reflective eyewear worn even inside, and a utility belt so packed with equipment, an excessively large flashlight, restraints, a stun gun he obviously yearned to employ, and what seemed very much like an amusingly large sheriff's insignia that jangled as he moved. Miller, or Terminator, was lanky, unsettlingly quiet, and had a vacant gaze that prompted one to question if he was contemplating your presence or merely determining the best way to incapacitate you. They approached their duties with fanatical devotion, policing the monochromatic maze of whispering pines as if it were Fallujah. Their first ventures onto my land were cautious. They would position their tactical golf cart one, as it was ostentatiously named, just on their side of the boundary and observe. Occasionally, they would jot down notes. On one occasion, Rambo bellowed through an inexpensive loudspeaker that one of my cattle was loitering with suspicious intent close to the fence. The cow, Bessie, simply continued chewing her cud, appearing unfazed. I was beginning to empathize with Bessie, but Abernathy, driven by whatever delusion of grandeur currently possessed him, was clearly not content with simple surveillance. The issuance of citations commenced. These were formal-appearing papers printed on Whispering Pines letterhead, itemizing diverse violations. I received one for unapproved farm-related smells, and another for undue cattle noises during specified tranquil periods. My most cherished was for neglecting to uphold visual consistency with community norms, referencing a section of entirely healthy alfalfa that evidently affronted their refined suburban tastes. These citations, naturally, possessed no legal validity at all. My ranch was not affiliated with their HOA, nor was it governed by their absurd regulations. I was aware of this, and deep down they likely were too. However, Abernathy excelled at intimidation. He plainly thought that by behaving as if he held power, others would simply yield. He was to be surprised in my case. I received each citation, duplicated it for my Abernathy's Follies file, and then formally employed the original to ignite the contents of the burn barrel. Nevertheless, I did begin to approach matters with greater seriousness regarding record-keeping. I set up several additional security cameras along the property boundary, the type that are inconspicuous yet provide high-resolution footage. I ensured my ranch employees were instructed to document any encounters with Rambo and Terminator using their mobile phones. Furthermore, I consulted with my attorney, Ben Carter, a friend from university who was an expert in property legislation. Ben heard the entire account, his reactions varying between bursts of laughter and expressions of incredulity. This Abernathy individual seems to be a textbook example of someone with an inflated sense of importance in a limited environment, Ben remarked. From a legal standpoint, they have no power over you. Yet, people of this nature can make your existence unpleasant through harassing strategies. Record everything meticulously. Each piece of correspondence, every meeting, every ridiculous citation. We aim to create a documented history so substantial it could overwhelm anyone if they attempt something genuinely foolish. These words proved to be prescient, as events would later show. The initial direct encounter with Rambo and Terminator on my property occurred shortly thereafter. I was inspecting a fence line on my ATV, clearly on my own land, when their golf cart appeared, jolting over the gentle incline that served as the informal demarcation. Lights were active, yes, they possessed flashing lights. They stopped, obstructing my way. Rambo emerged with a rolling gait, his hand placed on his stun gun. "Sir, this is a prohibited zone," he declared, his voice straining for authority but mainly sounding out of breath. "According to whom?" I inquired, switching off my ATV's engine. "According to the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association Security Department," Terminator intoned from the passenger side, his voice devoid of emotion and robotic. I nearly laughed aloud. "Gentlemen," I stated, maintaining a calm demeanor, "this is the Barm M Ranch. It has been the Barm M Ranch since your grandfathers were infants. You are presently trespassing. I advise you to turn that embellished golf cart around and depart before I contact the actual sheriff." Rambo's complexion became even more flushed. "We are performing official HOA duties. Mr. Abernathy has permitted us to monitor this boundary area to guarantee adherence to community agreements," he asserted boisterously. "Your community agreements conclude at that fence, Rambo?" I retorted, indicating with my thumb. "And my tolerance is nearly exhausted. Leave my property." For a brief second, I believed Rambo might genuinely attempt an action. His grip on his stun gun intensified. Terminator merely gazed. Then, rational thought, or possibly a hint of self-protection, seemed to pierce their combat fantasies. They mumbled something about submitting a report and unwillingly withdrew. This minor confrontation evidently wounded Abernathy's pride, because a week thereafter, the official menacing letter was delivered. It originated from a legal practice I was unfamiliar with, likely a low-cost firm Abernathy discovered via the internet, and it was a superb example of unfounded allegations and inflated legal jargon. The essence of it was that my primary ranch entrance, the substantial, robust one featuring the Barm brand seared into the arch above, constituted an unapproved infringement on an alleged historical Whispering Pines right-of-way and additionally breached their visual standards. It insisted on the gate's prompt dismantling within 7 days, or they would undertake all required measures to clear the impediment and charge the Barm Ranch for all related expenses. This was entirely fanciful. No such right-of-way existed. My property titles were indisputable, and their visual standards held as much authority over my gate as they did over lunar matters. Ben Carter composed a courteous yet firm response referencing the pertinent property statutes, title documents, and essentially advising Abernathy and his opportunistic attorney to desist. We dispatched it via certified mail requiring a signature upon receipt. Abernathy himself signed for it. I pictured his face adopting that lovely shade of violet he often displayed when obstructed. The 7-day limit passed. The gate stayed. I presumed that would conclude the matter. Surely even Abernathy wasn't foolish enough to genuinely attempt to physically dismantle my gate. Alas, how mistaken I was. His interpretation of all required measures was evidently far more direct and far more deranged than I could ever have conceived. He was on the verge of elevating this neighborhood dispute into an event that would capture public attention. In the week following Abernathy's receipt of Ben's resolute counter-argument concerning my contentious gate, a tense stillness descended upon the boundary. Rambo and Terminator remained in sight, conducting their minor patrols in their aggrandized golf cart, but they maintained a greater separation, primarily just scowling from a distance. It was the type of silence that comes before a major storm, weighty and electric. I noticed myself surveying the tree line more frequently, experiencing a sense of disquiet at the nape of my neck. It was within this time frame that my longtime acquaintance, Sheriff Jim Thompson, telephoned. Jim and I had a history stretching back to our days as high school football colleagues, and we had stayed connected through the years. He was an honorable individual, dependable, straightforward, and committed to his profession, which in a vast agricultural county such as ours frequently involved more public engagement and handling stray animals than serious criminal activity. "Hello there, you seasoned cattleman," his recognizable voice resonated through the telephone. "I have an extended weekend approaching. I considered accepting your invitation to visit the ranch. My spouse insists I need to unwind, and looking at your unattractive face for a couple of days seems less demanding than attending another municipal council session." I chuckled. "Unattractive face notwithstanding, the spare room is always prepared for you, Jim. Do come over. We could try some angling down by the stream. Perhaps even attempt to lure a coyote or two if you're inclined towards adventure. Tranquility and serenity assured." I had no inkling at the time how contrary to fact that assurance of tranquility and serenity would prove to be. Jim showed up on a Friday afternoon appearing weary yet glad to be out of his official attire and dressed in denim and a flannel shirt. We passed the evening on the veranda, sipping iced tea and observing the sunset color the mountains with hues of orange and purple. I updated him on the continuing drama involving Whispering Pines, Abernathy, and his pair of overzealous security personnel. Jim listened with forbearance, now and then shaking his head or emitting a soft whistle. Abernathy, who? He pondered, agitating the ice in his drink. Yes, I've encountered him a few times, mainly concerning traffic issues and missing toy dogs. The fellow certainly possesses an inflated view of his own significance. Personal security, you say, equipped with tactical attire? It seems he fancies himself the leader of his own small domain. He expressed empathy but, quite reasonably, could not provide much more than general guidance unless a genuine law was violated on my land. Continue to record everything meticulously, he repeated, mirroring Ben's advice. Individuals of that sort frequently create their own downfall if given sufficient opportunity. At that moment, I did not comprehend that Abernathy was getting ready to supply them with an entire shipping container's quantity of rope, complete with an explosive device. Saturday passed without incident, even tranquilly. Jim and I mended a portion of the fence. He proved unexpectedly capable for a sheriff accustomed to office work, and afterwards we enjoyed a few leisurely hours near the stream, although the fish showed no interest. The sole minor disruption occurred when one of my ranch employees, young Billy, informed us that Rambo and Terminator had positioned their golf cart directly across from my main entrance for almost an hour, simply observing. Billy mentioned Rambo was employing binoculars. It was disquieting yet not explicitly unlawful. They are attempting to cow you, Jim stated when I informed him. A typical intimidation maneuver. Pay them no mind. Do not provide the response they seek. That night, as we settled down for a steak meal, I could not dispel a sense of foreboding. It was a slight unease, similar to the atmospheric pressure change preceding a major tempest. I shared this with Jim. Likely just Abernathy irritating you, he commented, though his expression was pensive. Nevertheless, it is wise to remain watchful. We retired for the night rather early. Jim occupied the guest room situated at the front of the residence, which offered a view of the driveway and the main gate, located approximately 100 yards down the gravel path. I recall contemplating as I fell asleep that, with the sheriff present, Abernathy's enforcers would undoubtedly possess the prudence to remain inconspicuous. That was possibly my most substantial error in judgment throughout this entire episode. Misjudging the limitless foolishness of individuals nursing a grudge and an erroneous belief in their own power is a perilous undertaking. The following morning, shortly before sunrise, that foolishness was poised to declare its presence with a thunderous blast. The detonation tore through the quiet of the early morning at exactly 4:58 a.m. It was not merely a loud noise, it was a percussive impact that vibrated the entire ranch residence, causing windows to shake in their casings and dislodging a framed photograph of my grandparents, which fell to the ground. My eyes flew open, my heart pounding in my chest. My initial consideration in that confused, adrenaline-charged instant was a seismic event or perhaps a detonating gas pipeline. Then, amidst the ringing in my ears, I discerned the clear, frightened lowing of cattle and the agitated yelping of my canines. I leaped out of bed immediately, donning jeans and footwear, my thoughts racing. What on earth could that have been? As I searched for my flashlight, I detected activity from the spare bedroom. Jim Thompson, an individual obviously used to being abruptly awakened and spurred into response, was already in the corridor with a somber expression. He was still clad in his pajama trousers and a t-shirt, yet his eyes were fully alert and keen. What in blazes was that? He snarled, his tone entirely that of a sheriff, no longer that of a congenial fishing companion. No clue, I answered, making for the main entrance, but it seemed to originate from the vicinity of the primary gate. We rushed out onto the veranda, our flashlights piercing the dense blackness. The atmosphere was heavy with the pungent odor of smoke and another substance, something chemical and biting, like discharged pyrotechnics, only far more potent. In the area where my main gate was supposed to be, there was only a wavering orange luminescence and a disorganized outline of contorted metal. Remain here. It might be dangerous, Jim commanded, already advancing toward his county-provided vehicle parked next to my truck. He was retrieving something from the passenger side, but I had no intention of staying behind. This was my property, my entrance. Adrenaline overrode prudence. I dashed to my own vehicle, seizing the robust flashlight I store beneath the seat. As we approached the driveway's end, our vehicle lights revealed a spectacle of complete destruction. My handsome, robust barn gate, the one bearing the family insignia that had endured for generations, had vanished. Replacing it was a twisted pile of timber and metal, shattered uprights, and a depression in the gravel path resembling the impact site of a small celestial body. And positioned near the debris, outlined against the unsteady blaze of some still smoldering wood, stood two individuals. Even in the faint, disorganized illumination, their absurd tactical vests were clearly identifiable. Rambo and Terminator, Jenkins and Miller. They were simply standing there, Rambo clutching what appeared to be a remote explosive trigger, both of them appearing self-satisfied. Incredibly, shockingly self-satisfied. Then Jim Thompson, still attired in his sleepwear but now holding his service firearm and with his badge affixed to his t-shirt, moved into the beam of my vehicle's lights. "County Sheriff, do not move. Hands where I can observe them," he bellowed, his voice imbued with an undeniable gravitas that no amount of Abernathy's pomposity could ever replicate. The change in Rambo and Terminator was immediate and nearly farcical. Their self-satisfied looks disappeared, supplanted by expressions of absolute, open-mouthed astonishment, like a pair of predators who had trapped a small animal only to discover it was a formidable bear in disguise. Rambo let go of the detonator as though it had abruptly become scorching. Sheriff, what brings you here?" he stuttered, his voice significantly higher pitched than his customary faintly authoritative tone. Terminator simply became motionless, his eyes, for a change, displaying something beyond vacant disinterest. Sheer, unalloyed terror. "I am curious as to what you two are engaged in. Detonating private property at 5 in the morning with a makeshift explosive," Jim retorted sharply, moving forward carefully, his firearm unwavering. This is an official HOA operation," Rambo exclaimed, frantically attempting to recover a fragment of his fantasized power. Mr. Abernathy instructed us to dismantle this unlawful gate. It is an impediment." Jim remained unfazed. Mr. Abernathy lacks the power to command a simple meal outside his own home, much less approve the deployment of explosives. "You two are being apprehended for deliberate destruction of property, unlawful deployment of an explosive device, endangering others, and approximately 6 other serious crimes I will recall en route to the precinct. Turn about. Place your hands behind your backs. Immediately." The sound of handcuffs securing was among the most gratifying noises I had ever experienced. While Jim informed them of their Miranda rights, Rambo continued to prattle. "You are not authorized to apprehend us. We are officials of the Whispering Pines Security Department. This is a simple misapprehension." Jim merely regarded him, his face showing tired revulsion. "Young man," he stated, his voice toneless, "currently, you are two fools in inexpensive tactical attire who have just perpetrated a highly severe offense under my observation. And you are soon to learn that actual incarceration is considerably less enjoyable than engaging in make-believe law enforcement in your golf cart." The sun was just starting to appear above the mountains, bathing the spectacle of their complete, self-caused destruction in a golden radiance. It was, in my opinion, a rather lovely dawn. The arrival of Jim's subordinate officers was rapid. The blinking blue and red emergency lights slicing through the early morning fog seemed dreamlike against the setting of my burning gate and 2 perplexed-looking HOA officials seated in restraints on the back of Jim's vehicle. Rambo had at last become quiet, his face a pallid, doe-like visage of fear. Terminator remained quiet, but his typical emotionless look was supplanted by one indicating he was inwardly reviewing every poor choice that had brought him to this juncture. The deputies, skilled and effective, commenced safeguarding the location, cordoning off the vicinity of the cavity and capturing images. The explosive ordnance disposal unit was summoned from the county administrative center to inspect the remnants and the remains of the explosive. It was discovered to be a substantial quantity of unlawfully acquired, industrial-strength explosive material roughly connected to a remote trigger, significantly more potent and hazardous than I had even first surmised. These imbeciles could have caused fatalities. They might have killed me or Jim had we been nearer, or if the projectile fragments had scattered differently. The self-satisfied contentment I had experienced at their apprehension was now infused with a frigid fury at their heedless foolishness. After the initial turmoil diminished, and Rambo and Terminator were transported away in different police vehicles, still asserting their official HOA responsibilities to any officer who might hear them, which was no one, Jim faced me. He appeared fatigued, yet his jaw was set resolutely. "Well," he remarked, passing a hand through his already disheveled hair, "so much for a tranquil weekend." He patted my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I affirmed, still somewhat stunned. "Yes, just comprehending the utter foolishness of it all. They genuinely detonated my gate." Jim grumbled. "They certainly did, and now they will face the consequences. And so will your acquaintance Abernathy if he is as implicated as these two buffoons are already attempting to suggest." Evidently, Rambo, once securely situated in the rear of a patrol car and grasping the seriousness of his predicament, had begun to confess extensively, attempting to attribute the entire concept to Abernathy. Terminator, consistent with his moniker, stayed mostly quiet, but the physical proof at the location, including the trigger Rambo had let fall, was quite incriminating by itself. Later that morning, following the bomb squad's clearance of the area and my provision of an official account, 2 deputies visited the Whispering Pines luxury estates, particularly the residence of Mr. Arthur Abernathy. I was not present, naturally, but I learned about it subsequently from Jim, and it was, by all descriptions, a magnificent sight. Abernathy, probably roused by the far-off explosion and possibly speculating if his operatives had managed to accomplish their task, was reportedly wearing his silk sleepwear and initial dressing gown when the officers arrived. He first attempted to make a show of asserting his authority as HOA president, even making threats to contact his likely non-existent influential acquaintances. However, these officers were not Rambo and Terminator. They were genuine law enforcement personnel equipped with legitimate power and a legal document. Upon being shown the initial testimonies from his apprehended security heads and the proof of a serious criminal plot to destroy property with an explosive, Abernathy's self-control reputedly disintegrated like an old pastry. His complexion changed from an angry reddish-purple to a ghastly pale white. He was taken into custody and escorted from his beige mansion in restraints, greatly to the astonishment and amazement of his impeccably groomed neighbors who were just beginning their morning fitness strolls and quests for gluten-free baked goods. The self-styled monarch of Whispering Pines, an individual whose self-importance likely occupied its own postal district, was overthrown before he had even consumed his specialty coffee. The legal repercussions were, as Ben Carter joyfully described it, a magnificent catastrophe for them and a symphony of fairness for us. Rambo Jenkins and Terminator Miller faced numerous felony accusations encompassing possession and deployment of an unlawful explosive, conspiracy, severe property destruction, and reckless endangerment. Confronted with substantial jail sentences, both quickly changed their stories entirely, offering comprehensive accounts of Abernathy's clear directives to dismantle the gate using any method required and how he had even assisted them in acquiring them. Special fireworks which were actually blasting agents, likely via some dubious internet source. Abernathy, despite engaging a notably costly attorney, encountered comparable accusations. His efforts to portray himself as a dedicated community figure, deceived by excessively enthusiastic staff, failed to convince in light of the proof and the statements from his previous underlings. The criminal proceedings were expeditious. Jenkins and Miller, due to their cooperation, were given lighter sentences but still received multiple years in state penitentiary, a stark contrast to monitoring cul-de-sacs. Abernathy, the instigator, received a more substantial penalty. The presiding judge, a direct woman with evidently minimal tolerance for self-appointed HOA enforcers, set a precedent with his case. His escalade was likely seized before he even completed his initial meal in confinement. In the civil proceedings, Ben Carter thoroughly enjoyed himself. We initiated legal action against Abernathy as an individual, Jenkins, Miller, and the Whispering Pines HOA as a corporate body. The proof was irrefutable. The HOA's insurer, confronted with the indisputable evidence of severe incompetence and unlawful acts directed by their president, resolved the matter fairly swiftly, agreeing to a substantial financial settlement. This amount paid for a new, even more imposing gate, this time custom-made from forged steel with a strengthened concrete foundation. Let them attempt that maneuver again, along with recompense for losses, psychological suffering, and all attorney expenses. More significantly, the legal action and the criminal judgment caused major repercussions throughout Whispering Pines. The HOA governing body was shamefully disbanded. Abernathy's associates were removed. A different, far more rational assembly of homeowners assumed control, appalled by the events and keen to rectify the situation. The Whispering Pines Security Department was, naturally, promptly, and definitively dissolved. Their golf cart was said to have been sold for its components. The new HOA leaders actually contacted me, offered sincere apologies, and we succeeded in developing a remarkably friendly rapport. They even sought my advice on practical landscaping for our common boundary that would not entail requests to fell 100-year-old oak trees. I reconstructed the barn gate, larger and more robust than previously, serving as an unambiguous declaration that we intended to remain. Sheriff Jim Thompson, fortunately, did eventually get his peaceful weekend, although he quipped that his spouse now considers my ranch a high-risk conflict area. The entire episode served as a prime example of how unbridled self-importance and a trivial urge for dominance can result in astonishingly self-detrimental outcomes. Abernathy fancied himself a monarch governing his small domain, but he was merely an aggressor in a polo shirt with an unfounded feeling of privilege. He, Rambo, and Terminator discovered through harsh experience that there is a vast distinction between feigning authority and adhering to genuine statutes. And they realized that, on occasion, the unassuming rancher nearby might just have the county sheriff staying in his spare bedroom. One can never be certain.